This is a flow diagram, but it's a diagram around a conversation. So what's interesting is, let's say I have a skill that gives me my commute. That may look different in a mobile app, but in a conversation, there are these tiers, right, of yes-no questions. Do I know where you're coming from and do I know where you're going to is basically the information that I need. But I'm going to break that up into different levels of conversation and I'm going to hide the underlying complexity. You're not going to know the actual variables that I need. So, hi, I'm Travel Buddy. It's easy to tell you about my commute. Where are you starting from? Notice I don't even say home or destination. This is conversational. It's not a visual interface. And in fact, because I need to know the two locations, so I'm going from Mountain View to San Francisco, right? I don't need to actually ask them at the same time. I've broken them up. We don't even think about this subconsciously when we're having a conversation. If I ask you two questions at the same time, I'm forcing you to think differently than if I asked you first, hey, where are you from? And we just do that naturally as you start to have conversations. You see that as at a conference like this, right? I guess it depends if we're at a party and we've all had some beers or not, if we're going to ask multiple questions, or if I know you. Intrinsically, I may know some of this information, right? But an audio interface does not. So it's something that you need to think about. Context, interaction, how many questions. Make sense? All right. Spontaneously and naturally, we all do this, right? You don't want to force somebody to learn your interface, right? This is not a search engine. The minute that I have to remember commands, I'm not going to name names, but I was playing a game that was in let's just say a wintry frozen area with barbarians that get hit in the knee. And I wanted to use voice with that, and man, it was like a half an hour process of trying to figure out what were the actual commands. I should have just been able to say, hey, sort my inventory, right? That's what I mean by natural and spontaneous. And I think as an industry, we are totally learning how to do this over time. We're totally learning to make games and apps think like we do as human beings rather than forcing us as human beings to think like machines. The minute that you start forcing your players in unnatural ways to actually learn your interface, any kind of artificial syntax, they're not going to use it, right? They're just going to go to the controller or the mobile interface. What's interesting is a lot of this stuff you get worked out on paper and then you actually test and you have a conversation with somebody and you're like, wow, that doesn't work at all. I thought that would work. It worked for me, but all my friends started playing this and they said it sucked, right? So it's totally an area where people and human beings you really need to test. Here's an example, Star Lanes. This is from Joe Jaquinta. He's a developer. This is anybody play like Space Empire back in the day? Right? I was totally addicted to that thing, right? I used to run a bulletin board and I would give myself extra turns as a sys-up just so I could play, right? Confessions on stage. But what Joe has done is he's created a space MMO that's fully audio driven. This is completely free. You can get it on any Alexa device. And it's been an interesting experiment. The first thing that he wanted to do, if you think of Space Empire, right, you have different kinds of ships. So he had a fighter ship. You could be a merchant with kind of a trade vessel, or you could be a scout, very fast ship, right? What do you think happens if you try and support all of these type of ships with an audio interface that somebody has never even been exposed to? There's no way to do it. Right? He's created a wiki outside the game. That's what this is here. You can go to the wiki. You can understand factions. There are forums that people are active on and they talk. So you don't have to do everything through audio and voice. But the minute you try and do that in an actual interface at the time of gameplay, it falls apart. So a solution, which was pretty interesting, was to make 3 games. So you can download Star Lanes, Star Trade, and Star Scout. In essence, this is a fighter, Star Lanes. Star Trade, you're thinking like a merchant, and Star Scout, you are the scouting vehicle. Now, each one of these things is tailored to that type of gameplay so that the actual audio interface doesn't need to explain the others. If I'm a merchant, I know that there's fighters and scout ships around me, but I have no idea how they work. I care about trade. From a developer perspective, what's cool is this stuff is all the same on the back end. The integration is going to be done by you. You're not changing the way people are actually using and interacting and conversing with this. That make sense? So this is, I've seen this in lots of different scenarios. When you're starting to create your voice interface, with Alexa, we start off with a command word, and we use these things here, which are called start phrases, and then we have launch phrases, so you can see my service with a variable. What's important here, it doesn't matter, you don't have to follow this exact, but what's important is as you break up conversation, you need a way for your AI to understand when to listen. You need a way for your actual player to understand what they want to launch, and then you need some type of command, and you have to make it sound natural. So that's the key. Natural voice interactions, making sure that you're not frustrating your customer, and doing the work server side. So like in my own games, I do a ton of regex, because people say things differently, and the actual AI, when it understands and it transfers the intent, like I wrote a Dungeons and Dragons dice roller, so because I say D20, that's the way I learn, so I'm like, roll a D20, right? I don't say roll a 20-sided die, although you can say that. So I say roll a D20, and she goes ahead and rolls it, and the sound effect's actually my dice rolling, right? Just say it sources up on GitHub if you want to check it out. But if I get a 1, that for me is like bad. So she actually says, time for new dice, right? Things like that. But it's a very natural way, and all of that I did server side. So it doesn't matter if you say 20-sided or D20, and it doesn't matter what gets sent to me in my cloud service. I actually translate all of that. So VR, I've had a lot of VR startups that are starting to look at Alexa. What do you think the first thing happens if all of us are put in a scenario where we don't have a controller and we're walking around in VR, and you see a character that looks very human? Everybody says hello. Without even knowing it, you just expect some kind of response. That's just the way we're wired. It's like, hello, I'm in this environment. So a couple of things I wanted to point out of what people have been figuring out and what they've been doing around this scenario. First, voice is natural. It's a first UI for everyone, whether you've coded it or not. The worst game experience is you've got some type of user interface and somebody keeps going to voice, right? You want to think about voice. This is especially true in VR. You should create a listening model. And it's okay to have recorded voice responses based on the intents of language. So I've seen game devs that have set it up so that Alexa can actually hear, and if somebody says hello, that's the only thing they have, they'll actually get a response. So now you've started some interaction. It doesn't have to be full-based language. Pre-generated responses are okay. I've also seen the ability to do push-to-talk versus a keyword. So maybe you do have some type of controller on your hand, or maybe you have a big button on your wrist, right? And you just hit that button, and it's a Star Trek communicator, right? Pretty cool. And then I have the ability to do that in VR. That's pretty natural to do. Anybody know what this is, by the way? Over here on the left. Mechanical Turk. All right, so this is from hundreds of years ago. It was actually a chess playing. So from the outside, you didn't actually see this. It looked like a mannequin that could play chess, but underneath was not a computer, right? We're talking like 500-600 years ago when this was invented. There was a human being in that cabinet that would actually have a mirror and could see the chessboard and was actually playing. A lot of this is common today. In fact, I know Facebook said when you're asking with a lot of the chats, most of that is human beings today. That'll actually turn into AI over time. That's okay in a game, right? I've seen games now where somebody is asking something in VR, it's getting translated by Alexa, and then the person, they don't even have to be there. They could be sitting in a desk on the other side of the world, and they actually talk into a microphone back. So you don't have to code end-to-end what the actual responses are. You can kind of use this hybrid human being, right? There's nothing still like us. Human beings are amazing. You can use that with code to create an experience. Never expose people to your error handling too, right? Some of this stuff is obvious, but I see it every day. In fact, we've got a couple stuff in the works where we're going to give it so that you can handle unexpected errors like that. All right, here's a couple of things. This is from a guide you can get online. It's completely free. This is just some stuff that we've seen, and we do provide examples. This is a couple things you need to think about. One is make it clear a user needs to respond. If I say, hey, welcome to Dave's Trivia, what do, right? Or if I say, welcome to Dave's Trivia, please ask me a question. Well, what type of question, man? Is there like sci-fi, sports, trivia? Like, what can I do? So make sure they need to actually understand they need to respond. Don't assume they know what to do, right? That's part of it. Clearly present the options. It's so interesting how we talk as human beings. Like if I said, would you like a burger or fries? How many of you would say yes? Because you have burger and fries, but I use the word or. And unless you caught that, and we're actually listening, you're going to say yes. So you don't get that in a visual interface, but you're going to get that all the time as you start to build out audio interfaces. And you'll be like, what was this person trying to do, right? So keep it brief, clearly present the options, especially and or ors. Don't overwhelm them with too many options. And you can give them examples, right? It's okay to give them examples, but sometimes just changing a sentence or two in how you actually say something, in the same way I can rephrase what I'm saying now to you, can click. The ability to do that in your own audio interfaces is true too. Don't ask unnecessary questions. Like if you've got a joke app and I ask for a joke and I say, would you like a joke app, right? That's stupid. Don't be redundant like that. So make sure you're using confirmation selectively, right? Give people information that they want when they want it very quickly. Don't be too chatty. Make sure they know they're in the right place. Like if you and I have been talking for 10 minutes and, suddenly I got like my phone rang, there's a IM or something, and I have another thread, I may go back to you and saying, what were we talking about, right? But when you're having a conversation with me, if you just say, hey, yeah, that's right, and you repeat one or two words, that subtly tells you where you are in the right place. And then avoid technical and legal jargon. And ultimately what we're doing is we're writing for the ear and not the eye. And that's it. All right. Hopefully, you guys all learned something. Like I said, this is all online. If you want to check these out too, I know this session is being recorded. Couple of books you may want to check out in this space, but it's a growing space. I think the technology is finally here. We're living in the future, and I'm excited to start to see more visual, audio, and verbal interfaces that you all create.
Thanks, Dave. That was very, very interesting. And, I'm personally very interested in natural language. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much that's going to happen in the future. We're just going to be able to talk to our computers just like Star Trek.
Yep.
And so you showed one game that looks really interesting, space game.
Yep.
Are there others? Like, what's the current...
Yeah, actually, Warner Brothers, a lot of the DC writers, they actually wrote a story about the investigation of Bruce Wayne's parents. And it reminds me, it's like the Choose Your Own Adventure Zork games, but it's the radio tales of old, like the, what was the one, like the Lone Ranger back in the day, right? And so it's a recorded voice actor, and then you hear the experience, you're a detective, you hear things moving around, and then you communicate naturally about what you want to do. It's almost like, remember Maniac Mansion and all those games, and you had to say like, talk to, do this? It's along those lines, right? And we've seen a lot of interest in that as well. Customers can review it, so that you can see all that bubble up. There's a games section.
Was probably the single biggest place I've had these interactions is in games, but like customer service when you call in to, do something with your cell phone or whatever. And those are like awful experiences.
Yeah.
And I think
it's always the same voice too.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like it obviously breaks several of your kind of design principles, and it really tries to take just sort of a hierarchical approach to what would be much better presented over a computer, and kind of try to make that into voice in this very force-fit kind of way. Is that a fair?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that, that's kind of what people know of voice. And that is not natural language understanding, that's actually voice translation. So what's happening on the end is you say something and it's just looking for keywords. And if I said, you know what, this thing's stupid, put me with an operator. Like, it may hear operator and connect you, but it has no idea what my emotions are. There's a lot of research that's coming out of like the face. Like, am I angry when I'm responding to you, computer? If I am, don't ask it to me the same way, right? Like, as human beings, we see all these things in people's faces without even thinking about it. We can pick up on body language and subtlety. So that's, I think, is really the turning point that you're going to start to see, is that machines can understand that a little bit more. And so we're getting to the point when you start to see things like that in customer service, that I can just have a conversation, and then there's going to be the ability to understand that. And because that's why you want a human being. Why do you want a human being? Because you know it's this computer program that has a flow chart, and it's not going to understand what you want. Right? So that's the difference.
It also seems like it's incredibly inefficient. Like, if I think like as a customer, like, why am I getting angry? It's like, I'd rather talk to a person.
Chat, right? That's what I do, yeah.
Or look at a computer screen, because then I can move through it quicker, right?
Yeah, it's another good example of why voice would not be a first turn UI for that. And that's what really the NLU and the natural language understanding is going to change that.
I'm
Great
getting
question.
very, very good at shouting operator at my phone.
Yeah, or zero.
Operator,
Zero
operator,
on the phone. Yeah.
Operator. Great.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks
Thank you.
so much.